Boss fights with employee in front of everyone, without knowing he was the owner's son. Tyler James Wilson felt cold sweat running down his back as Richard Peterson yelled in his face. The 23-year-old young man kept his eyes down, his trembling hands holding a folder of documents that had been thrown on the floor minutes before. "You are a disgrace to this company," Richard shouted, his voice echoing through the meeting room. 3 months here, and all you can do is mess up. How did someone so incompetent get this job? The other employees watched in awkward silence. Dorothy, the 52-year-old receptionist, looked away. Mike, from the finance department, nervously fiddled with his phone. Everyone knew the fury of Richard Peterson, regional manager of Wilson Distributors for 8 years, but they had never seen something so humiliating. "Answer me when I talk to you." Richard slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. "Or do you have some kind of mental problem?" Tyler looked up for a moment. He didn't answer, he just swallowed hard. What Richard didn't know was that this quiet, seemingly frightened young man was Tyler James Wilson, the only son of Robert Wilson, the owner of the company. 3 months ago, Tyler had convinced his father to let him work at the Chicago branch under a false identity, using only his first name, to understand the internal problems that had been reported by anonymous employees. "I asked you a question." Richard moved even closer, his face red with anger, just inches from Tyler's face. "Are you going to answer, or are you just going to stand there like an idiot?" Jennifer, a 45-year-old saleswoman who had worked at the company for 12 years, timidly tried to intervene. "Richard, maybe it would be better to talk in private." "Shut up, Jennifer." Richard turned to her with bloodshot eyes. "Nobody asked for your opinion. And you," he pointed back at Tyler. "Pick that folder up off the floor and get out of my sight. I don't want to see your face for the rest of the day." Tyler slowly bent down to pick up the scattered documents. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a deep indignation that grew with every second. During these 3 months, he had seen Richard humiliate dozens of employees, but being the direct target of this inhuman behavior was devastating. "And don't think I'm going to forget this incompetence," Richard continued as Tyler gathered the papers. "I will make sure to document every single one of your mistakes. Your probationary contract expires next month, and I will make sure you don't stay here." "Yes, sir," Tyler murmured, keeping his voice low. "What? I didn't hear you." "Yes, sir," repeated Tyler a little louder. Richard laughed scornfully. "At least you learned that much. Now get out of here before I change my mind and fire you today." Tyler left the room with the documents in his hands, feeling the weight of his colleagues' stares. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. He took his phone out of his pocket and opened the Notes app, where he had been documenting all the abuse cases he had witnessed. He began to type. "Meeting of March 14th. Richard Peterson publicly humiliated me for 15 minutes, called me incompetent, an idiot, and questioned my mental capacity, prevented Jennifer from speaking, threatened my job. Witnesses: Dorothy from reception, Mike from finance, Jennifer from sales, Bill from logistics, Rachel from marketing." Over the past 3 months, Tyler had filled his phone with similar reports. Employees crying in the bathroom, people quitting because they couldn't handle the pressure, experienced salespeople being humiliated over impossible targets. Richard Peterson had turned that branch into a toxic environment. Tyler walks to his desk in the corner of the room. It was a small desk pushed against the wall, far from the windows. Richard had chosen that spot on purpose for Tyler, saying that newcomers don't deserve a window view. There, isolated, Tyler could observe everything without drawing attention. He sat in his old, creaky swivel chair, which groaned every time he moved. Beside him, Walter, a 62-year-old man who had been with the company for 25 years, greeted him with a discreet nod. "Are you all right, Tyler?" whispered Walter, looking around to make sure Richard wasn't nearby. "I'm fine, Mr. Walter, thank you." Walter had become a sort of mentor to Tyler in these 3 months. He was one of the oldest employees, having started at Wilson Distributors when Robert Wilson was still building the business. He knew every product, every client, every process in the company. But Richard treated him like a nuisance, always hinting that he should retire. "Don't take that man's words to heart," Walter continued whispering. He treats everyone like that. I've seen a lot of good people leave because of him." "Why doesn't anyone complain to the owner?" Walter chuckled softly, but it was a bitter laugh. "Complain? Son, you don't know how things work around here. Richard has the boss's phone number. They talk every week. Any complaint against him becomes grounds for dismissal. I've seen it happen 3 times. Tyler felt a pang of guilt. His father did indeed speak with Richard weekly, and from what he knew, he always praised the results of the Chicago branch. The numbers were good. Growing sales, controlled costs, few reported workplace accidents. But the numbers didn't tell the human story behind them. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, the rest of the morning passed in a tense silence. Richard left for an external meeting, and the atmosphere in the room immediately lightened. People began to talk normally, to smile, to joke. It was amazing how the presence of just one person could completely change the environment. "Tyler," Jennifer approached his desk, "you don't have to accept being treated that way. There are labor laws that protect against harassment." Tyler looked at her. Jennifer had a maternal, concerned expression. Her brown hair was tied up in a bun, and she wore a navy blue blazer that had seen better days. "I know, Jennifer, but I need this job. Everyone here needs their job, but that doesn't mean we should accept humiliation." Walter joined the conversation. "Jennifer is right, but we also know how hard it is to find another job these days. Richard knows that and takes advantage." Dorothy appeared carrying a tray with coffees. "I brought some coffee for you all. After that awful scene, I think we all need it." Dorothy had been with the company for 15 years. She was a kind woman, with graying hair and a warm smile, who knew the personal life of every employee. She knew when someone was having financial troubles, when someone's children were sick, when marriages were in crisis. She was the mother of the company, the person everyone turned to when they needed to vent. "Dorothy, have you seen Richard treat someone like that before?" Tyler asked. Dorothy sighed and looked around before answering. "Son, in 15 years here, I've seen all sorts of things. Richard wasn't like this when he arrived. He was actually quite friendly in the early years, but after he started moving up in the company, he changed. Nowadays, not a week goes by without him humiliating someone. And why doesn't anyone seek help? Who would we go to?" Dorothy lowered her voice. "Richard has the owner's ear. He always says any problem here is our fault, that we're lazy, incompetent. The owner lives in Milwaukee, comes here once a year at most. And when he does, Richard turns into an angel." Tyler almost choked on his coffee. His father didn't live in Milwaukee. He lived right in Chicago, just 20 minutes away. And he visited the branches much more often than the employees imagined, always giving Richard advance notice. He began to understand why he had never witnessed anything wrong during the official visits. "What hurts me the most," Dorothy continued, "is seeing good people leave because of him. Last week, Karen resigned. 15 years with the company, she knew all the clients, never had a problem. But Richard picked on her every day, said she was slow, that she didn't understand sales. She left crying." "Karen from sales?" asked Tyler. "The same. She was one of the best salespeople we ever had. But Richard didn't like her because she questioned some of his methods. She said he promised impossible things to clients just to meet targets." Tyler made a mental note. He needed to investigate this story about Karen. If Richard was making impossible promises to clients, it could be causing much bigger problems for the company. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Richard had returned from the meeting, and his mood was even worse. His tie was crooked, his hair was messy, and he was carrying a briefcase so tightly that his knuckles were white. "What's this social gathering here?" he shouted. "Don't you people have work to do?" Everyone quickly scattered, returning to their desks. Richard walked straight over to Tyler. "And you, still here? I thought I told you to get lost. You told me to get out of your sight for the rest of the day. I'm working at my desk." Richard stopped and looked at Tyler with a dangerous expression. "Are you trying to be a smart aleck with me?" His voice was low but full of threat. "No, sir. I just clarified what I understood." "Clarified?" Richard laughed, but it was a cold laugh. "Come with me, now." Tyler stood up and followed Richard to a small meeting room at the back of the company. Richard closed the door and turned to him. "Let's get one thing perfectly clear here." Richard pushed Tyler against the wall. "I don't know who you think you are, but while you're on my team, you will respect me. And respect means not questioning what I say, not correcting me, and not acting smart." Tyler could smell Richard's breath, a mix of coffee and cigarettes. "I wasn't disrespecting you." "You weren't?" Richard slammed his hand on the wall, right next to Tyler's head. "Do you think I'm an idiot? Do you think I didn't notice your little game?" "What little game?" "This poor me act, playing the victim, trying to win over your colleagues, making them think I'm the villain of the story." Tyler looked directly into Richard's eyes. For the first time in 3 months, he didn't look away. "You are the villain of the story." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He seemed to be processing what he had just heard. "What did you say?" "You heard me." Richard took a step back as if he had been punched. "You just signed your termination, kid. Tomorrow morning you'll be out on the street." "Maybe, but at least I'll leave knowing I told the truth." Richard stormed out, slamming the door. Tyler stayed in the room for a few minutes, trying to process what he had just done. He had lost control, exposed his mission, put everything at risk. But at the same time, he felt an enormous sense of relief. For 3 months he had swallowed humiliations, seen colleagues suffering, documented abuses. He had finally said what he felt. When he returned to his desk, everyone avoided looking at him. The tension was palpable. Richard was in his office, talking loudly on the phone. Tyler could make out a few words: insubordination, termination, example to the others. Walter approached discreetly. "Son, what happened in there?" I told him the truth. And what was the truth? That he's a tyrant, that he treats people like garbage, that he turns this place into a hell. Walter closed his eyes and shook his head. "Tyler, you're a good kid, but you just made a mistake that could cost you dearly." "It already has. He said he's going to fire me tomorrow." "It's not just that. Richard has power here. He can hurt you in other ways. He can badmouth you to other employers. He can make up stories about your performance. You're young. You still have your whole life ahead of you. You shouldn't have done that." Tyler looked at Walter and felt a deep sadness. That man had worked for 25 years at his father's company. He was competent, loyal, dedicated. But he lived in fear of a tyrant who could destroy his life with the stroke of a pen. "Mr. Walter, answer one thing for me. Are you happy working here?" Walter took a long time to answer. "Happiness is a complicated word, son. I have a salary, I can support my family, pay the bills. That's a lot these days. But what about feeling respected, valued, treated with dignity? Those are luxuries that people like me can't afford to demand." "They shouldn't be luxuries. They should be basic rights." Walter looked at Tyler with an expression that mixed admiration and pity. "You're still very young. You'll learn that the world isn't fair and that sometimes we need to accept bad situations to survive." "What if I said it doesn't have to be that way?" "What do you mean?" "What if there's a way to change things, to make Richard respect you?" Walter chuckled softly. "Son, Richard is untouchable here. He has the owner's support. The branch's numbers are good. He knows how to protect himself. I've seen people better than you and me try to stand up to him. They all lost." Richard appeared at his office door and shouted, "Tyler, get in here now." Tyler stood up. This time he wasn't nervous. The conversation with Walter had awakened something in him, a determination he hadn't felt in months. He entered Richard's office and closed the door. "Sit," Richard pointed to a chair in front of his desk. Tyler sat. Richard stood behind the desk, assuming a position of power. "I've spoken with HR. Your termination is already being processed. You have until the end of the day tomorrow to hand everything over and leave. I understand. But before that, you're going to do one thing for me. You're going to apologize publicly to the entire team for your inappropriate behavior." Tyler smiled. It was a genuine smile, the first one in 3 months. "I'm not going to do that." "What?" "I'm not going to apologize for telling the truth." Richard leaned over the desk. You don't understand the situation you're in. I can make your life very difficult from now on. I can make sure you never get a job at a decent company in Chicago again. Richard, can I ask you a question? What question? Were you always like this, or did you become like this working here? Richard seemed disarmed by the question. What kind of question is that? A sincere one. Dorothy told me you were different when you started. What changed? I grew up. I learned that to lead a team you need to be firm, to set boundaries. There's a difference between being firm and being cruel. Cruel? Richard let out a loud laugh. You think I'm cruel? I think you lost your way. I think you confused leadership with authoritarianism, firmness with abuse, results with human suffering. Richard was silent for a long time. His hands trembled slightly. You know something? His voice was quieter now. You remind me of someone. Who? Myself when I was younger. I also thought I could change the world, that I could do things differently. But life has taught me that idealism doesn't pay bills or hit targets. And what else has life taught you? That everyone has a price, that every person, if pressured enough, will humiliate themselves, that there are no heroes in the corporate world, only survivors. Tyler looked at Richard and, for the first time, saw beyond the anger and the authoritarianism. He saw a tired, wounded man who had lost something essential along the way. Richard, you don't have to live like this. Like what? Angry, hurting people, creating enemies. You could be a leader that people respect, not one that people fear. Respect doesn't hit targets, Tyler. Fear does. What if I prove you're wrong? Richard laughed again, but this time with less conviction. How is a kid in his early 20s going to prove anything to me about leadership? Let me make you a bet. What bet? Give me 1 more week. If in 1 week I can't improve the environment at this branch, you can fire me any way you want. You can humiliate me publicly. You can make up any story. But if I succeed, you'll listen to me. Richard looked at Tyler with curiosity. And how do you plan to improve the environment in a week? By treating people with respect, listening to their ideas, showing that it's possible to lead without humiliating. You have no authority here. You're just a junior employee. Authority doesn't come from a title, Richard. It comes from how we treat people. Richard became thoughtful. Tyler could see he was considering the proposal. And what do you get out of this? The chance to show there's a better way of doing things. And if you lose, then you were right about me from the start. Richard sat back in his chair and was silent for a few minutes, drumming his fingers on the desk. 1 week, he finally said. But with conditions. What conditions? You'll work directly with me. You'll do everything I say, exactly how I say it. And at the end of the week, if the results aren't better than they are now, you walk out of here carrying your things in front of everyone. I agree. And one more thing. You will explain to me exactly how you plan to do this. I don't accept empty promises. Tyler took a deep breath. The moment had come to put into practice everything he had observed over the last 3 months. First, I'll talk with each employee individually. I'll listen to their concerns, their ideas, their suggestions. Second, I'll implement a system where everyone feels comfortable speaking up without fear of retaliation. Third, I'll show each person that their work is valued and important. That's human resources department talk. It doesn't solve real problems. Richard, can I ask you something? When was the last time you praised someone here? Richard opened his mouth to answer but stopped. Or when was the last time you asked someone how they were feeling about their work? Richard remained silent. Or when was the last time you admitted you made a mistake? Where are you going with these questions? I'm trying to get to the fact that you've forgotten you're dealing with human beings, not machines. Every person here has feelings, fears, dreams, personal problems. When you treat them like numbers, they work like numbers. When you treat them like people, they work like people. Richard leaned back in his chair. You talk a good game, Tyler. But in practice, when the target isn't met, when a client complains, when the numbers are in the red, your pretty words don't solve anything. What if I show you that motivated and respected people work better than people who are afraid? How? Give me this week. At the end, We'll compare not just the environment, but also the financial results. Richard drummed his fingers on the desk once more. All right, 1 week. But if you fail, I don't want to hear any more of this talk about humane treatment and respect. You're going to accept that I'm right, and that this is the way things work. Agreed. The two men shook hands. When Tyler left the room, he felt a mix of excitement and terror. He had just made the most important bet of his life, and not only was his job on the line, but also the chance to prove to his father that serious problems existed in that branch. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. For the rest of that afternoon, Tyler began to put his plan into action. First, he looked for Dorothy at the reception desk. Dorothy, can I speak with you in private? Of course, son. What happened? They went to a small break room at the back of the company. I made a bet with Richard. I have 1 week to improve the work environment here. Dorothy's eyes widened. Tyler, are you crazy? Richard is going to walk all over you this week and fire you anyway. Maybe. But I'd rather try and fail than just accept things as they are. What do you want from me? I want you to tell me the truth about what's happening here, without fear, without worrying about payback. I want to understand what's really wrong. Dorothy looked around, checking if they were alone. Son, where do I begin? She sighed. Richard has created a climate of fear here. People are afraid to suggest anything, to question any process, to make any mistake. Everyone is walking on eggshells. Give me some concrete examples. Last month, Mike from accounting noticed an error in the billing system that was making the company lose money. When he brought it to Richard, he was publicly humiliated for not having checked it before. Mike never suggested anything again. What kind of error? An automatic discount that was being applied twice on the invoices for some big clients. The company was losing about $5,000 a month. Tyler made a mental note of that information. And was the error fixed? Yes, but Richard took the credit, said he had discovered the problem himself. What else? Walter has 25 years of experience. He knows all the suppliers, all the processes. But Richard treats him like he's dead weight. Walter developed a method to optimize deliveries that could save a lot of money on fuel, but he never managed to present the idea. Why? Because Richard doesn't listen to anyone. He believes he knows everything and that the employees are here just to follow orders. Dorothy, if you could change one thing in this company, what would it be? Dorothy thought for a moment. Communication. No one here feels comfortable speaking up. There's a monthly team meeting, but it's just Richard talking and everyone listening. No one can ask questions, give suggestions, or express concerns. What would you all do if you knew there would be no payback? I myself have several ideas for improving customer service. Jennifer has proposals for new products. Bill from logistics has a plan to reorganize the inventory. Walter has ideas for reducing costs. Mike has suggestions for improving financial controls. And none of that has been implemented? Nothing. Richard doesn't want to hear it. He says our job is to work, not to think. Tyler talked for another 20 minutes with Dorothy, writing down every detail, every suggestion, every problem reported. When he finished, he looked for Walter. Mr. Walter, can I speak with you? Of course, young man. They went to a more secluded corner of the warehouse. I want to hear your ideas for improving the company. Walter looked at him suspiciously. What for? You'll be gone by tomorrow. Maybe not. I made a deal with Richard. I have a week to show that it's possible to do things differently. Tyler, you're a good kid, but you're being naive. Richard isn't going to change. I'm not trying to change Richard. I'm trying to change the way you all feel about working here. Walter looked at Tyler for a long time. You know, son, you remind me of the owner of this company when he was younger. Tyler almost choked. What do you mean? Robert Wilson. I've worked for him for 25 years, back when the company was small. He always treated everyone with respect, always listened to our ideas. He was a true leader. And what changed? The company grew. He opened branches, hired managers, became more distant from the day-to-day. I don't think he has any idea what happens here. Tyler felt a tightness in his chest. His father really didn't know what Richard was doing to the employees. "Walter, tell me your ideas." For the next hour, Walter detailed an impressive plan to optimize the company's operations. He had studied delivery routes, negotiated discounts with suppliers, developed a system to reduce waste, all written down in an old notebook he carried in his pocket. "Why did you never present this to Richard?" "I tried a few times in the early years. He always said I didn't understand the business, that my job was to execute, not to plan. So I stopped trying." "What if I guarantee your ideas will be heard?" "How can you guarantee that? You're just a junior employee." Trust me. Tyler spent the rest of the afternoon talking individually with each employee. Jennifer had brilliant ideas for product expansion. Mike had identified several problems in the financial system that could be easily fixed. Bill had a plan to reorganize the warehouse that could increase efficiency by 30%. Rachel from marketing had developed campaigns that had been sitting in a drawer for months. Every conversation revealed a wasted talent, an ignored idea, a lost opportunity. Richard had managed to create a company full of smart and creative people who felt invisible and undervalued. At the end of the workday, Tyler organized all the information he had collected. It was impressive how many improvements could be implemented immediately, at no extra cost, just by using the employees' knowledge and experience. Richard approached his desk. "How was your first day as an HR consultant?" "Eye-opening. Did you find the solution to all the company's problems?" "I found people with solutions. They just need someone to listen to them." Richard laughed. "Pretty words, Tyler. Tomorrow, I want to see concrete actions." "You will." That night, Tyler called his father. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important." "What is it, son?" "It's about the Chicago branch." "Is there a problem? Richard always tells me everything is running smoothly." "Dad, can I ask you a favor?" "Don't call Richard about our conversation, at least not yet." "Why? What's going on?" Tyler told his father everything. The abuse, the humiliations, the toxic environment, the waste of talent. Robert Wilson was silent for a long time. "Tyler, why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because you need to see it for yourself. Richard is completely different when you're around. What do you want me to do? Give me a few more days. I'm trying a different approach. If it works, you'll understand everything. If it doesn't, we can talk about firing Richard and restructuring the branch. Are you sure you know what you're doing?" "I am, Dad. Trust me." Robert agreed to give Tyler a few days, but he was clearly worried. After hanging up the phone, Tyler felt more determined than ever. It wasn't just a bet with Richard. It was a mission to save that branch and the people who worked there. The next morning, Tyler arrived at the company early. He had prepared a presentation with all the ideas collected from the employees, organized in a clear and objective way. When Richard arrived, Tyler was waiting for him. "Ready for your second day as the company's savior," Richard said ironically. "Ready to show you what I discovered yesterday." They headed to the meeting room, where Tyler had set up his presentation. "Richard, you said yesterday that pretty words don't solve practical problems, so I'm going to show you practical solutions." Tyler began to present the employees' ideas, one by one, with implementation details and projections of the results. This idea from Walter for optimizing routes could save 20% on fuel. This suggestion from Mike could reduce financial losses by $15,000 a month. This proposal from Jennifer could increase sales by at least 15%. Richard listened in silence, but Tyler could see he was impressed. "Where did you get this information?" "By talking to people, listening to what they have to say." "And do you think they will implement these ideas voluntarily?" "I think they will work with much more motivation if they know their opinions matter." "Tyler, these are interesting ideas, but implementing changes in a company isn't that simple. Why don't we start with a small idea? To test it?" Richard thought for a moment. "Which one do you suggest?" "The warehouse reorganization proposed by Bill. It's simple, costs nothing, and can improve efficiency immediately." "And if it doesn't work?" "Then we go back to the old system. No harm done." Richard reluctantly agreed. Tyler called Bill to present his idea directly to Richard. For the first time in years, Bill had the opportunity to explain his plan in detail. By reorganizing the products by how often they ship out, instead of in alphabetical order, Bill explained with enthusiasm, we can cut the order picking time almost in half. Richard asked a few technical questions, and Bill answered with confidence and knowledge. In the end, Richard authorized the test. 1 week, he said. If it doesn't work, we go back to the old system. Thank you, Richard, Bill said, smiling for the first time in months. For the rest of the morning, Tyler organized the implementation of the new warehouse layout. Bill worked with renewed energy, explaining the new system to the other employees. Everyone got involved in the project, suggesting small tweaks and improvements. Richard watched everything from a distance, with an expression that was hard to decipher. At lunch, Tyler joined his colleagues in the company break room. Tyler, what did you do to Richard? Asked Jennifer. He didn't yell at anyone this morning. I just showed him some of your ideas. And he listened? He listened, and he approved testing Bill's proposal. Walter shook his head, disbelieving. In 25 years working here, I've never seen Richard implement an employee's idea. Maybe he just needed to see the ideas organized clearly, Tyler suggested. Dorothy came over. Tyler, I don't know what you're doing, but the atmosphere is different today. People are talking more, smiling more. It's because you feel heard. That changes everything. In the afternoon, the first results of the warehouse reorganization began to show. Orders were being picked faster, with fewer mistakes. Bill was beaming, explaining the system to anyone who would listen. Richard approached Tyler. I have to admit that Bill's idea is working. He knows what he's doing. He just needed an opportunity to show it. Tyler, can I ask you a personal question? Sure. Why do you care so much about this? You could have just accepted your layoff and looked for another job. Why are you fighting so hard for this place? Tyler hesitated. It was a complicated question, one that touched on the heart of his secret mission. Because I believe everyone deserves to work in a place where they feel respected and valued, and because I believe you can be a better leader than you are right now. Richard looked at Tyler with a thoughtful expression. Do you really believe that? That I can change? I do. I saw you listen to Bill today. I saw you consider new ideas. I saw you treat people with respect. You are capable of being the leader this team deserves. And what if I can't? What if this is just a temporary phase? Then at least you tried, and that's a start in itself. At the end of the second day, Tyler spoke with his father, Robert, on the phone again. How are things going, son? Better than I expected. Richard is starting to listen to people. And do you think it's a real change? It's too early to tell, but today I saw a side of him I didn't know. I think deep down he wants to be a good leader. He just doesn't know how. And the employees? They're more upbeat. For the first time in months, they feel like part of the company, not just cogs in a machine. Tyler, I'm proud of you. No matter how this ends, you're doing the right thing. Thanks, Dad. Just give me a few more days to see how far I can take this. The third day started with a small crisis. An important client had complained about a delivery delay, and Richard was slipping back into his old patterns of behavior. Who was responsible for this delivery? He shouted across the room. Rachel, who had coordinated the order, stood up, trembling. It was me, Richard. How do you explain this delay? The client is furious. Tyler stepped in. Richard, can I suggest something? What? How about we sit down with Rachel and understand what happened instead of assuming it was her fault? Richard seemed annoyed by the intervention, but agreed. The three of them went to the meeting room. Rachel, please explain what happened, Tyler said gently. The order left our company on time, Rachel explained. But there was a problem with the shipping carrier. The truck broke down on the road. Did you communicate this to the client? Richard asked, still irritated. I tried, but I couldn't reach him. I left messages on his home phone and cell phone. Tyler asked, Rachel, do you have other ways to contact this client? I have his email, but Richard always said important communications should be by phone. Richard and Tyler exchanged looks. Next time, Richard said, calmer now, use all available means of communication. The important thing is that the client is informed. Richard, Tyler added, how about we create a protocol for situations like this, so everyone knows how to act when something unexpected happens? Richard thought for a moment. Good idea. Rachel, can you help develop this protocol? Rachel smiled, surprised to be included in the solution instead of just being blamed for the problem. Of course, I can prepare a proposal by tomorrow. When they left the room, Richard said to Tyler, You made me realize something interesting. What? I always assume that when something goes wrong, it's because someone didn't do their job properly. But sometimes the problem is systemic, not individual. And when the problem is individual, the person might need training or support, not humiliation. You're teaching me things I should have known years ago. Richard, you know these things. You just forgot to apply them. For the rest of the week, Tyler continued implementing small changes. He organized a meeting where each employee could present an idea. He created a simple feedback system where people could express concerns without fear. He established a recognition ritual where good results were celebrated publicly. Richard, initially resistant, began to actively participate in the changes. He praised Mike for identifying a cost savings. She thanked Dorothy for a suggestion that improved customer service. She implemented Jennifer's plan for a new product. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It's a huge help for us, who are just getting started. Now continuing. On the 6th day, something happened that completely changed the company's dynamic. Walter approached Richard with a serious expression. Richard, can I have a word with you? Of course, Walter. They headed to the meeting room. Richard, I want to apologize to you, Walter said. Apologize? For what? For holding a grudge against you all these years, for having stopped trying to collaborate, for having closed myself off in my own world. Richard was visibly moved. Walter, I'm the one who should apologize. I treated you poorly. I disregarded your experience. I wasted your knowledge. But you are changing. Everyone is noticing. I'm trying. Tyler showed me there's a better way to lead. Richard, can I tell you something? I always wanted to work well with you. I always had ideas to improve the company. I just didn't know how to present them. And I never knew how to listen. The two men shook hands, and for the first time in years, Walter walked out of Richard's office smiling. Tyler watched the scene from a distance and felt a deep emotion. It wasn't just a company that was changing. Human lives were being transformed. On the 7th and final day of the bet, Richard called a general meeting. Team, as you know, this week has been different, he began. Tyler challenged me to rethink our way of working, and I want to share the results with you. Richard presented impressive numbers. Warehouse efficiency had increased by 28%, delivery errors had decreased by 40%, customer complaints had been cut in half, and for the first time in months no employee had called in sick. But more important than the numbers, Richard continued, is the atmosphere. I feel different working here, and I hope you do too. Dorothy raised her hand. Richard, may I say something? Of course. This was the best week we've had in years. For the first time, I feel comfortable coming to work. Jennifer spoke up. Richard, thank you for listening to our ideas. It had been a long time since I felt useful here. Mike added, Richard, you were always competent, but this week you were a leader. Richard was visibly emotional. Everyone, I need to apologize to all of you. For years I treated you poorly. I disregarded your opinions. I created a toxic environment. That wasn't leadership, it was authoritarianism. Walter stood up. Richard, we all make mistakes. What's important is that we have the courage to change. And I want to keep changing. Richard looked at Tyler. With your help. At the end of the meeting, Richard approached Tyler. You won the bet. Actually, Richard, we all won. How so? You discovered how to be the leader you always had the potential to be. The team discovered that their opinions matter, and I discovered that change is possible when people truly want to change. Richard smiled. Tyler, can I make you an offer? What offer? I want you to be my direct assistant. I want you to help me make these changes permanent. Tyler hesitated. The moment had come to reveal his true identity. Richard, before I accept your offer, I need to tell you something. What? My full name isn't just Tyler. It's Tyler James Wilson. Richard looked confused. Wilson? I'm Robert Wilson's son, the owner of the company. The room fell completely silent. Richard paled. The other employees exchanged shocked glances. You are the boss's son? I am, and I've been working here for 3 months to understand what's really happening at this branch. Richard sat down heavily in a chair. So all of this was a setup? You were testing me? At first, yes. My father was receiving anonymous complaints about problems at the branch, but he could never prove anything. He sent me to investigate. And now, are you going to fire me? Richard, do you think I would spend an entire week trying to help you improve if I wanted to fire you? Richard looked at Tyler, still processing the revelation. So what's going to happen to me? That depends on you. Do you want to keep being the leader you discovered this week? Or do you want to go back to being the tyrant you were before? I want to keep changing. I want to be a real leader, Tyler smiled. Then you remain as manager. But with a few conditions. What are they? First, we will permanently implement all the changes we discussed this week. Second, we will have monthly feedback meetings where any employee can express concerns without fear. Third, you will participate in a leadership development program. And fourth, there is no fourth, just those 3. Richard seemed relieved. Tyler, can I ask you a question? Of course. Why didn't you fire me? It would have been easier for you and for the company. Richard, firing you would have been easy, but it wouldn't have been fair. You're not a bad person. You just lost your way. And this week showed that you are capable of finding that way again. Walter approached. Tyler, can I ask you something too? Of course, Walter. Does your father know you're here? He does, and he's very proud of the results we achieved this week. Dorothy spoke up. Tyler, are you going to keep working here? I am, but not undercover anymore. I'll work directly with Richard to make sure the changes stick. Jennifer asked, and what happens if Richard goes back to his old ways? Richard answered before Tyler could. I won't go back. This week showed me what it's like to work in a united team, where people respect each other. I don't want to lose that again. At the end of that day, when everyone had already left, Richard and Tyler stayed talking in the conference room. Tyler, can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Of course. When I started working here, I was like you. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be a good leader. But there was a difficult period in my personal life. My wife was sick. My young son needed surgery. I was in debt. The pressure for results was enormous. What happened? I started taking it out on people. I thought that by being tougher, more demanding, I could get better results faster, and it worked, at least at first. But at what cost? At the cost of my humanity. Little by little I became someone I didn't recognize in the mirror. My wife even told me I was changing for the worse. And her? She recovered, thank God. My son grew up healthy. The debts were paid. But I had already gotten used to being the tyrant. I forgot how to be human. Richard, it's never too late to change. You gave me this second chance. I won't waste it. They shook hands again, but this time it was different. It was no longer boss and employee or owner's son and manager. They were 2 people who had learned something important about leadership, respect, and redemption. 2 weeks later, Robert Wilson made his first official visit to the branch since Tyler had begun his secret mission. But this time it was different from all previous visits. There were no special preparations, no pre-visit nervousness, no Richard turned into an angel. The company kept running normally, because now it ran well every day. Richard, Robert said upon arriving, I want to understand what happened here. The numbers have improved significantly, the complaints have disappeared, and for the first time in years, no employee has quit. Mr. Wilson, your son taught me some important lessons about leadership. What lessons? That leading isn't about ordering people around, it's about inspiring them. That results don't come from fear, but from motivation. That every employee has something valuable to contribute. Robert Wilson looked around and saw employees working with energy, smiling, collaborating with each other. And how did you implement these changes? Tyler James Wilson stepped closer. Dad, It was simple. We started listening to people. For the rest of the day, Robert Wilson spoke individually with several employees. They all confirmed Richard Peterson's transformation and the new work environment. "Walter," Robert Wilson said to the most senior employee, "you've worked with me for 25 years. Tell me the truth about what changed here." "Mr. Wilson, can I be frank?" "Of course." Richard was a tyrant. People were afraid of him. They worked under pressure. They didn't feel valued. But your son showed him a different way to lead. Now, Richard is the boss he always should have been. And you trust that this change is permanent. I do. Because I saw Richard apologize publicly. I saw him implement our ideas. I saw him treat people with respect. A man who has the courage to admit his mistakes and change is a man you can trust. At the end of the day, Robert Wilson gathered Richard and Tyler in his office. "You've done something extraordinary here," he said. "You've transformed not just a company, but human lives." "Dad," Tyler said, "the credit goes to Richard. He had the courage to change." "And Tyler had the wisdom to show me how," Richard added. Robert Wilson looked at the two men with pride. "Richard, I want to make you a proposal." "What proposal, Mr. Wilson?" "I want you to lead a management development program in all our branches, to teach other managers what you've learned here." Richard was moved. "Mr. Wilson, it would be an honor." "And Tyler, I want you to coordinate this program, the two of you working together." Father and son embraced. Richard joined the hug. It was the end of a transformative journey and the beginning of a new phase for the company. 6 months later, Wilson Distributors became a benchmark for humane management. Richard traveled to other branches teaching techniques for respectful leadership. Tyler coordinated trainings on communication and employee appreciation, but more important than the external recognition were the personal transformations. Richard had regained his humanity and discovered that being respected was far better than being feared. The employees at the Chicago branch worked with genuine motivation, knowing their contributions were valued. Walter had been promoted to logistics supervisor, finally putting his 25 years of experience to recognized use. Dorothy became customer service coordinator, implementing her ideas to improve client relations. Mike took over financial management, applying his cost-saving suggestions. Jennifer led new product development. Bill coordinated the entire distribution system. One Friday afternoon, when things were quieter, Tyler and Richard were organizing materials for the next management training. "Richard, can I ask you something?" Tyler said. "Of course." "Do you miss how things were before? The absolute power the employees fear?" Richard laughed. "Tyler, there is no greater power than inspiring people to willingly give their best. Before, people did just the bare minimum to avoid getting fired. Today, they do more than is expected, because they want to contribute. And personally, how do you feel?" "For the first time in years, I sleep peacefully. Before, I'd come home stressed, irritable, taking my frustration out on my family. My wife even suggested therapy. Today, I come to work happy and go home fulfilled. And the results? The numbers speak for themselves. This branch has become the company's most productive, with the highest employee satisfaction and the lowest turnover. We proved that being humane doesn't mean being less efficient." Walter approached them. "Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to thank you again for everything you've done." "For what, Walter?" Tyler asked. "For giving me back my dignity at work, for showing me that my experience has value, for making me feel useful again." "Walter," Richard said, "I'm the one who should be thanking you. For having patience with me all these years, for not giving up on the company, for giving me a second chance. Richard, we all deserve second chances. You made the most of yours." Dorothy arrived with a cake. "Everyone, it's the 6-month anniversary of our new company. I thought we should celebrate." Gradually, all the employees gathered in the break room. It was a scene that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. Richard and the employees celebrating together, laughing, talking like regular people. "Everyone," Richard said, "I'd like to make a toast." Everyone raised their coffee cups. "To Tyler, who showed me it's never too late to change. To all of you, who had the patience to give me a second chance. And to our new way of working, where everyone is respected and valued. Cheers!" Everyone shouted together. After the small celebration, when everyone had returned to work, Tyler received a call from his father. "Son, I need to tell you something." "What is it, Dad?" "The Chicago branch has become a model for other companies. I received 3 invitations this week to tell our story at management conferences." "And are you going to accept?" "We are going to accept. You, me, and Richard together." "Dad, there's something I want to tell you." "What?" "Thank you for trusting me, for giving me the freedom to try a different approach. Tyler, you proved something I always believed but had forgotten, that people are the most important asset of any company, and that treating them well isn't just the right thing to do, it's also the most efficient. And now? Now we're going to expand this model to all the branches. It will be a lot of work, it will require patience, and there will be resistance from some managers, but it's worth it. Dad, can I suggest something?" "Of course." "How about we create a program where business owners' children work undercover in their own companies, to help them understand the reality of their employees?" Robert laughed on the other end of the line. "Son, you've always been an idealist, but your ideals are transforming lives." That evening, Tyler was gathering his things to leave when Richard approached him. "Tyler, can I tell you a secret?" "Sure." "In the beginning, when you made that bet with me, I didn't believe it would work. I thought you were just a young idealist who didn't understand how the real world works. And what do you think now? I think you understand how the world should work, and you had the courage to make it happen." "Richard, the world only works right when people like you have the courage to change. I just showed you a possibility. You made it a reality." "Tyler, can I make a confession?" "Of course. You saved not just this company, but also my life. I was becoming a bitter, lonely, hated person. Today I have friends at work, people's respect and satisfaction in what I do. Richard, you were always capable of being that person. You just needed someone to remind you." 2 years later, Wilson Distributors had become a case study in business schools. The humanized leadership program developed by Tyler and Richard had been implemented in all branches with extraordinary results. But beyond the business success, there were personal stories of transformation. Richard had become a sought-after speaker on leadership. Walter had been promoted to regional manager. Dorothy coordinated the company's wellness program. All the employees at the original branch had grown professionally. One Monday morning, Tyler was preparing a presentation when he received an unexpected visitor. It was Karen, the saleswoman who had resigned 2 years earlier. "Tyler, can I talk to you?" "Of course, Karen. How are you?" "Well, thank you. Working at another company, but I've been hearing about the changes that happened here." "And what brings you back?" "Curiosity. I wanted to see if it's true that Richard really changed." Tyler smiled. "Do you want to talk to him?" "Actually, yes." Tyler called Richard, who seemed nervous when he saw Karen. "Karen, how are you?" "Well, Richard, thank you for asking. Karen, first of all, I need to apologize to you. I treated you very poorly. I was unfair. I forced you out of a company where you were doing good work." Karen was visibly moved. "Richard, thank you for saying that. It means a lot to me." "Karen, I know I can't undo what I did, but I'd like to make you an offer." "What offer?" "We want you back, as sales supervisor, with a better salary and the guarantee that you will be treated with all the respect you always deserved." Karen looked at Tyler, who confirmed with a nod. "Richard, can I think about it?" "Of course, but I want you to know your position is guaranteed, no matter how much time you need to decide." After Karen left, Richard turned to Tyler. "Do you think she'll come back?" "I think so. But even if she doesn't, the important thing is that you had the courage to apologize. Tyler, that was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but also one of the most important." "Why?" "Because it made me realize how many other people I've hurt over the years, and it made me want to fix what I can." A week later, Karen accepted the offer and returned to the company. Her return was celebrated by all the employees, who welcomed her like a heroine who had stood up to Richard in the old days. On her first day back, Karen sought out Tyler. "Tyler, I want to thank you." "Why?" "For turning Richard into a human being, for creating an environment where people like me can work with dignity." Karen, the person who changed Richard was Richard himself. I just showed him it was possible. And how did you know it was possible? Because I believe every person has the potential to be good. Sometimes they just need someone to believe in them. 3 years after the transformation began, Wilson Distributors had become one of the most desirable companies to work for in Chicago. The waiting lists for job openings were enormous, not just because of the competitive salaries, but mainly because of the culture of respect and human value. Tyler had been promoted to Director of Human Development. Richard remained as manager of the Chicago branch, but he also coordinated the leadership program at other units. Robert Wilson had decided to expand the model to other companies, creating a consultancy specialized in organizational transformation. One Thursday afternoon, Tyler was in his new office when Dorothy knocked on the door. "Tyler, there's a young lady at reception asking to speak with you." "Who is it?" "She said her name is Rachel and that she worked here a few years ago." Tyler smiled. It was Rachel, the intern who had been fired by Richard on the day he was hired. "Dorothy, can you send her in?" Rachel entered the office, visibly nervous. "Tyler, sorry to bother you. I know you must be very busy." "Not at all, Rachel. Have a seat. How are you?" "Well, thank you. I finished college, took some courses. I'm working in marketing at a smaller company. But I've been hearing about the changes that happened here." "And what do you want to know?" "If it's true that Richard really changed. Because when I left here, he was, well, you know what he was like." "Rachel, Richard has become one of the best leaders I know. Humane, respectful, someone who values people. It's hard to believe." "Would you like to talk to him?" Rachel hesitated. "Actually, yes, but I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "That he's still the same person as before, that he'll treat me poorly again." Tyler stood up. "Rachel, I'm going to make you a promise. If Richard treats you badly, I personally guarantee it will be made right. But trust me, he has changed." Tyler called Richard, who was clearly emotional upon seeing Rachel. "Rachel, my God, how are you?" "Well, Richard, thank you." Richard approached her with tear-filled eyes. "Rachel, I need to apologize to you from the bottom of my heart. I fired you unfairly. I treated you cruelly. I destroyed your trust. It was one of the worst moments of my career as a manager." Rachel began to cry. "Richard, thank you for saying that. You don't know how difficult it was for me. I spent months thinking I was good for nothing." "You were always competent, dedicated, intelligent. The problem was never you. It was always me." "Richard, can I ask you a question?" "Anything." "Why did you change? What happened?" Richard looked at Tyler. "This young man showed me that there was a better way to lead. He taught me that respecting people isn't a weakness, it's a strength. He helped me regain my humanity." Rachel looked at Tyler. "And how did you manage to do that?" "Rachel, I just showed Richard the potential he always had. The transformation was his doing." "Richard," Rachel said, "can I tell you something?" "Of course." "You owe me an opportunity." Richard smiled. "You're right, and I would like to offer you that opportunity. How about heading up our marketing department?" Rachel's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really, with an excellent salary and the guarantee that you will be treated with the utmost respect." "Richard, I accept." The three of them hugged. It was another life being transformed, another story of redemption being written. 5 years after it all began, Wilson Distributors had become a business empire built on human values. With over 20 branches, all following the model of respectful leadership developed by Tyler and Richard. But more important than the financial growth were the hundreds of lives that had been transformed. Autocratic managers who had learned to lead with empathy. Employees who had regained their dignity and motivation. Families who had benefited from happier, more professionally fulfilled parents. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story of transformation? Do you believe Richard really changed, or do you think people like that can't truly transform? Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most, and if you've ever experienced a similar situation. Leave a like if the story touched your heart, and most importantly, Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that show the power of human redemption.